Right now, something unusual is building around XRP. And if you are not paying attention, you might miss one of the biggest moves in crypto history because what analysts are starting to whisper is no longer a small prediction. It is a massive possibility, a scenario where XRP does not just grow slowly, but suddenly explodes into a rally so strong that it shocks the entire market. And the number being discussed is not 10% or even 100%. It is 23,000%, a move that could push XRP toward $300 and beyond. And the real question is not whether this sounds crazy. The real question is why serious investors are starting to take this idea seriously right now. When we talk about a 23,000% move, it sounds unrealistic at first, but in crypto history, we have already seen assets move even more than that in a short time. And the difference today is that XRP is not a small unknown project anymore. It is one of the most discussed digital assets in the world with strong connections to financial systems, global payments, and institutions that are slowly entering the blockchain space, which means if a rally begins, it will not just be driven by hype, it will be powered by real world use and massive liquidity entering the market. Now, to understand why this kind of explosive rally is even being talked about, we need to look at the current position of XRP because right now it is sitting in a phase that many experts call accumulation, which means big players are quietly buying while the price is still low. And this phase is usually boring for most people. But historically, this is where the biggest opportunities are created because once accumulation ends, the price does not move slowly, it moves aggressively. And by the time the public realizes what is happening, the majority of the move is already gone. Another important factor that is building pressure for a breakout is the overall crypto market cycle, because every cycle has a moment where one asset suddenly becomes the center of attention, and many believe XRP has not yet had its full cycle run, especially compared to other coins that already made strong moves, which creates a situation where XRP could be preparing for a delayed but extremely powerful rally that surprises even experienced traders. At the same time, there is growing attention from institutions, and this is where things become even more interesting because when large financial players enter a market, they do not move in small amounts. They bring billions, and XRP is one of the few digital assets designed specifically for fast and cheap cross border payments, which makes it very attractive for banks and payment providers. And if adoption increases even slightly, the demand shock could push prices much higher than most people expect. But here is something most people ignore. Price explosions do not happen randomly. They are usually the result of multiple factors aligning at the same time, including market sentiment, liquidity, regulation clarity, and technical breakout patterns. And right now, XRP is slowly moving toward a point where all these elements could align together, creating the perfect storm for a massive rally. There is also a psychological side to this because markets are driven by human behavior. And once a strong upward move begins, it creates fear of missing out, which brings in more buyers, which pushes the price even higher. And this cycle continues until the move becomes parabolic. And if XRP enters that phase, the numbers that seem impossible today can suddenly become realistic targets. Now you might be thinking, is $300 really possible? And the honest answer is that it depends on how strong the momentum becomes. Because for XRP to reach that level, it would require a huge increase in market value. But if global adoption increases and liquidity flows into the asset, the market can expand much faster than expected, especially in a bull cycle where capital moves quickly between assets. At this stage, the most important thing is not to blindly believe any price prediction, but to understand the conditions that could lead to such a move. Because once you understand the logic behind it, you can see why people are starting to talk about a potential explosive rally instead of ignoring it completely. And right now, the early signs are beginning to show. But The real question is what exactly could trigger this kind of move? And why are some insiders quietly preparing for something much bigger than what the public is expecting? Because in the next part, we are going to break down the hidden drivers that could push XRP into this explosive phase and why timing might be more important than price. Now, let's go deeper into what could actually trigger this kind of explosive rally because price predictions alone do not move markets, real catalysts do. And right now, XRP is sitting in a position where several powerful triggers are slowly building at the same time, which is exactly the type of setup that can lead to a sudden and aggressive breakout when the pressure becomes too strong to hold. One of the biggest drivers that many people are watching closely is regulatory clarity because for a long time, uncertainty has been one of the main reasons XRP has not fully moved like other major cryptocurrencies. And when uncertainty exists, big investors stay cautious. But the moment clarity starts to appear, it removes fear from the market. And when fear disappears, capital begins to flow in quickly and not in small amounts, but in large institutional waves that can change price direction almost instantly. This is important because large financial institutions do not like risk without rules. They wait for clear guidelines before entering any market. And XRP has been one of the most affected assets when it comes to regulation. But now there are signs that this phase is slowly shifting. And if a clear and positive outcome becomes fully established, it could act as a green signal for institutions to enter aggressively, which would dramatically increase demand in a very short period of time. Another key factor is utility, because unlike many cryptocurrencies that rely mostly on hype, XRP has a strong use case in global payments. And this is where things become very interesting because the current financial system is slow, expensive, and outdated in many ways, especially when it comes to cross border transactions. And XRP offers a faster and cheaper alternative, which means if adoption increases, the demand will not just be speculative, it will be based on real world usage. When demand is driven by real utility, it creates a stronger and more sustainable price movement. And if major payment providers or banks begin to use XRP more actively, it could create a chain reaction where more institutions follow. Because in finance, once one major player adopts a new system, others quickly move to avoid being left behind. And this competitive pressure can accelerate adoption faster than expected. At the same time, there is a growing narrative around liquidity because XRP is designed to act as a bridge asset, which means it can move value between different currencies quickly. And in a world where global transactions are increasing every day, the need for efficient liquidity solutions is becoming more important. And if XRP becomes a key player in this space, the amount of value flowing through it could increase massively, which would directly impact its price. Now, let's talk about market structure because this is where many experienced traders are focusing their attention. And what they are seeing is a long period of consolidation, which usually happens before a big move because the market is building energy. And once that energy is released, it often leads to a sharp breakout. And XRP has been in this type of structure for a significant amount of time, which increases the probability of a strong move when it finally breaks out. There is also another element that is often underestimated, and that is timing within the broader crypto cycle. Because markets do not move all assets at the same time, instead, capital rotates from one asset to another, and XRP is often seen as a late mover, which means it can stay quiet while other coins are rising and then suddenly enter a powerful rally when attention shifts. And this delayed reaction can sometimes lead to even stronger price movements because of the built up pressure. At the same time, social sentiment is slowly changing. And this is something that should not be ignored because public perception plays a huge role in price movements. And when sentiment shifts from doubt to excitement, it creates a wave of new buyers entering the market. And if this happens while institutional money is also flowing in, it creates a powerful combination that can drive prices much higher than expected. But here is the most important point: all these factors are not isolated, they are connected. And when they start aligning together, they create momentum. And momentum is what drives explosive rallies, not just slow growth. And right now, XRP is moving closer to a point where multiple catalysts could activate at the same time, which is exactly the type of environment where extreme price moves can happen. So when people talk about a 23,000% rally, they are not just guessing randomly. They are looking at the possibility of these triggers aligning in a way that creates a massive surge in demand. And while it is still a scenario and not a guarantee, the setup is becoming more interesting with each passing day. Now, the next question becomes even more important because even if all these catalysts are in place, how does the price actually move from where it is now to something like $300? And what kind of path would it take to reach that level? Because in the next part, we are going to break down the realistic price journey of XRP step by step and understand how such a massive rally could actually unfold in the real market. Now, let's break down the most important question, which is how XRP could realistically move from its current levels to something as extreme as $300, because a move like that does not happen in one straight line. It happens in stages. And understanding these stages is what separates emotional decisions from smart positioning in the market. The first stage is what many investors completely ignore, and that is the early breakout phase, because before any explosive rally begins, the asset needs to break out of its long consolidation range. And this is usually where the first signs of strength appear, but the move still feels small compared to what is coming next. And during this phase, XRP could move from low levels into a noticeable uptrend, possibly doubling or tripling in value, which for many people already feels like a big win. But in reality, this is just the beginning of a much larger cycle. As the breakout becomes stronger, the second stage begins, which is acceleration. And this is where momentum starts to build quickly because more traders begin to notice the move, media attention increases, and social platforms start discussing XRP again. And during this phase, the price does not just move steadily, it starts to climb faster with higher volume. And this is where early investors begin to see significant returns, while new buyers start entering out of curiosity and growing confidence. Then comes the third stage, which is the expansion phase. And this is where things become very powerful because at this point, the market is no longer driven only by early adopters. It starts attracting mainstream attention. And this is when institutional money can play a major role because large players often wait for confirmation before entering. And once they see strong upward momentum and reduced risk, they begin to allocate capital. And when large amounts of money enter the market, it can push the price up much faster than retail investors alone. During this expansion phase, XRP could potentially move into double digit territory. And this is where the narrative begins to shift from doubt to belief. Because once an asset crosses key psychological levels, people start to see it differently. And this creates a feedback loop where rising prices attract more buyers, and more buyers push the price even higher. After that, we enter the fourth stage, which is the parabolic phase. And this is where the idea of a 23,000% rally becomes more realistic because this stage is driven by extreme momentum, strong emotions, and massive inflows of capital. And during this period, price movements can become very aggressive with sharp increases happening in a short time. And this is where the market often overshoots expectations because fear of missing out reaches its peak and people start buying without thinking long term. In this phase, XRP could move into triple digit territory if the conditions are strong enough. But it is important to understand that parabolic moves are not stable, they are fast and unpredictable, which means while the upside can be huge, the risk also increases significantly. And this is why experienced investors always stay aware during this stage instead of blindly chasing the price. Now, the final stage is what we call the peak and correction phase. And this is something that happens in every market cycle because no asset goes up forever. And after a massive rally, there is always a period where the price corrects, sometimes sharply, as early investors take profits and the market resets. And this phase can be confusing for new investors because it feels like everything is falling apart. But in reality, it is a natural part of the cycle. So when we talk about XRP reaching something like $300, it is not about jumping from today's price to that level overnight. It is about moving through these stages step by step, with each phase building on the previous one. And the key to understanding this journey is recognizing where the market currently is and what signals to watch as it progresses. Another important detail is that market cap plays a role in this movement because for XRP to reach such high levels, a significant amount of capital needs to enter the market. But in a strong bull cycle, this is not impossible, especially if global adoption increases and institutional money flows into the space, because the crypto market as a whole can expand rapidly during periods of high demand. At the same time, liquidity and supply dynamics also matter because XRP has a large circulating supply, which means price movements require strong demand. But if demand increases faster than supply availability, especially during high adoption phases, it can create upward pressure that pushes the price higher at an accelerated rate. So the idea of a massive rally is not just based on hope, it is based on understanding how markets move in cycles and how different stages build momentum over time. And while the exact numbers cannot be guaranteed, the path itself follows a pattern that has been seen before in multiple assets across different cycles. Now, the next critical question becomes even more interesting because even if this type of rally is possible, who is actually preparing for it? And what are the smart players doing right now while the majority of people are still uncertain? Because in the next part, we are going to uncover the behavior of large investors and how they position themselves before a major move begins, and why this could give you a major advantage if you understand it early. Now, let's focus on what really separates average investors from smart money, because the biggest difference is not luck, it is behavior. And right now, while most people are still confused about where XRP is going, large investors are not waiting for confirmation. They are quietly positioning themselves in advance because they understand one simple rule of the market. By the time something becomes obvious, the opportunity is already gone. Smart money does not chase hype, it builds positions during uncertainty. And this is exactly what we are seeing in the current phase, because while retail investors are distracted by short term price movements and emotional reactions, experienced players are looking at long term structure, and they are focusing on accumulation zones where the risk is lower and the potential upside is significantly higher. This behavior is not new. It has happened in every major market cycle, whether it was Bitcoin, Ethereum, or other assets that eventually made huge moves. The pattern is always the same: early accumulation by informed investors, followed by a breakout, then acceleration, and finally mass participation when the price is already much higher. And the majority of people enter too late because they wait for confirmation instead of understanding the setup. Another important thing to understand is that large investors do not buy everything at once. They scale into their positions slowly because they know that sudden large purchases can move the market against them. So instead, they spread their buying over time, which is why the price often stays within a range for a long period, creating the illusion that nothing is happening, while in reality, a silent transfer of assets is taking place from weak hands to strong hands. At the same time, these investors are also watching key signals that most people ignore, such as liquidity levels, trading volume patterns, and macroeconomic conditions, because they know that a true explosive rally requires more than just hype. It needs strong support from capital flow. And when they see early signs of increasing liquidity entering the market, they begin to increase their exposure, preparing for a larger move. There is also a strategic mindset behind how smart money operates because they are not focused on short term profits. They are looking for asymmetric opportunities, which means situations where the potential reward is much greater than the risk. And XRP at its current stage is seen by some as one of those opportunities because if the downside is limited compared to the upside potential, it becomes an attractive position for long term accumulation. Now, let's talk about patience because this is where most retail investors fail. They expect immediate results. And when the market does not move quickly, they lose interest or make emotional decisions. But smart money understands that real wealth in markets is built by waiting for the right moment and not by constantly reacting to every small price movement. And this patience allows them to stay in positions long enough to benefit from the full cycle, not just a small part of it. Another key behavior is risk management, because even the most confident investors do not assume that any outcome is guaranteed. They prepare for different scenarios and they never invest more than they are willing to hold through volatility because they understand that markets can move unpredictably in the short term, even if the long term direction looks strong. At the same time, they pay attention to market psychology because they know that emotions drive price movements. And when fear is high, it often creates buying opportunities, while extreme excitement can signal that the market is overheating. And by understanding these emotional cycles, they position themselves ahead of major shifts instead of reacting after they happen. Right now, the market is in a phase where uncertainty still exists, which means the majority of people are not fully confident yet. And this is exactly the type of environment where smart money operates most effectively because they can build positions without attracting too much attention. And once the market sentiment shifts and confidence returns, they are already in profit while others are just starting to enter. So when you hear about a possible explosive rally, the real question is not just whether it will happen, but whether you understand how positioning works before the move begins. Because the difference between catching a major opportunity and missing it often comes down to timing and mindset, not just information. And this leads to the final and most important part, because even if all the signals look strong and the setup appears perfect, how should you approach this situation without making costly mistakes? And what is the smartest way to think about opportunities like this in a market that can change very quickly? Because in the next part, we are going to bring everything together and focus on the practical mindset, the risks, and the reality behind these big predictions so you can stay informed without falling into common traps that many investors face. Now, let's bring everything together because understanding a potential explosive rally is one thing, but approaching it the right way is what truly matters. And this is where most people either make smart decisions or costly mistakes, especially in a fast moving market like crypto, where emotions can easily take control if there is no clear mindset in place. At this stage, it is very important to understand that big predictions like a 23,000% rally or a price target of $300 are not guarantees. They are possibilities based on certain conditions. And while those conditions may be forming, the market can still move in different directions depending on timing, liquidity, global events, and investor behavior, which means the smartest approach is not blind belief, but informed awareness. One of the biggest mistakes people make is chasing price after a move has already started, because when the market begins to rise quickly, it creates excitement, and that excitement turns into urgency, making people feel like they have to enter immediately or they will miss out. but this is often where risk becomes highest because entering during emotional peaks can lead to poor decisions and unnecessary losses if the market corrects. Instead, a more balanced approach is to focus on understanding the overall trend and positioning gradually rather than reacting suddenly, because markets reward patience more than impulsive action. And those who take time to study the structure, follow developments, and manage their exposure carefully are usually the ones who benefit the most in the long run. Another key factor to keep in mind is volatility, because if XRP enters a strong rally, it will not move in a straight line. There will be pullbacks, corrections, and moments of uncertainty, even during an uptrend. And this is completely normal. But for someone who is not prepared, these movements can create panic, leading to decisions that go against their original plan, which is why having a clear strategy is so important before entering any position. It is also important to stay realistic because while high price targets are exciting, the journey to those levels can take time. And in some cases, the market may not reach those exact numbers at all, which is why focusing only on extreme predictions can be risky. And a better approach is to look at multiple scenarios and prepare for different outcomes instead of relying on a single expectation. At the same time, keeping emotions under control is one of the most powerful advantages any investor can have because the market constantly tests patience and discipline. And those who remain calm during both rising and falling phases are able to make clearer decisions, while those driven by fear or excitement often end up reacting too late or too early. Another important point is continuous learning because the crypto market evolves quickly, and staying updated with news, developments, and market trends can help you make better decisions over time, especially with an asset like XRP, where regulatory updates, partnerships, and adoption news can directly influence price movements in a short period. So, when you look at the idea of an explosive rally, instead of asking only how high the price can go, a more useful question is how prepared you are to handle the opportunity. Because preparation includes understanding risk, managing expectations, and having a plan that allows you to stay consistent regardless of short term market movements. And this is where the real advantage lies, not just in predicting price, but in controlling your actions. Because in the end, the market rewards those who are disciplined, patient, and informed, not those who simply follow hype without a clear understanding. Now, before we end, it is important to keep one thing in mind. This content is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not financial advice, and you should always do your own research before making any investment decisions because every market involves risk, and your financial choices should always match your personal situation and risk tolerance. If you found this breakdown helpful and you want to stay updated with the latest insights and market analysis, make sure to like the video and subscribe because staying informed can make a big difference in how you approach opportunities like this in the future. And the more you understand the market, the better your chances of making smart decisions over time.